Check, check. Okay, so last little drum EQ video in the series, we're looking at overheads. Now remember, overheads are a special case because they're taking a bird's eye view of the whole drum kit. So they are going to contain every element of the drum kit in them. Notice this one we're looking at here, the overheads track, which I've soloed, has two channels in it. This means it's a stereo channel because you've got the left and the right. So typically you would have two mono channels, i.e. two separate channels for the left and the right overhead, but in this case it has been turned into one stereo file just for ease of this exercise. So let's listen to what we've got on the overheads. Okay, so you can hear all the kit, predominantly the cymbals. The cymbals are the loudest bit, and depending on how the rest of your drums sound after you've mixed them, depends on how you're going to go about EQing the overheads. So we typically don't want to gate the overheads. Let's look at what's coming in. Okay, so that capture of the snare could go really nicely with our dedicated snare tracks and combine to make a really nice fat sounding snare. We could decide that it's actually just not really doing anything, and we might decide that we want to cut that area on the overheads. Same with the kick drum. The kick drum in the overheads could be adding a little bit of weight or something to the kick drum and enhancing it in the mix, or it could also be doing the opposite, like with the snare drum. So really, when you're mixing the overheads, you need to reference it to the entire mix. If we look at our magic diagram, cymbals, yes, they do have a few key subjective areas we need to look at, but in terms of a overhead mic, which is capturing the whole kit, you really need to think about what you want to keep in it and remove in terms of the rest of the kit. The cymbals are occupying this area, as we can see. Okay, so an awful lot of information up here, right from the whole range, really. So one example might be that we want to if we solo all the drums, play them together, we might decide that the kick isn't really doing anything in the overhead mic, so we want to cut that out. It's just adding a bit of mud or something. So let's listen to that. Okay, so depending on your mix, you might decide, like I've decided, that we don't really want to hear the kick drum in the overheads. So we know the kick drum is around there, so we can just cut that out. Now we'll just have the overhead on solo. Okay, and then put that back into the mix, and there'll be a subtle change to the balance of the kick drum and in the low end. Actually, that was quite dramatic. I can certainly hear the dedicated kick track a lot more clearly and a lot punchier in the mix, and that's the whole idea of EQing and doing these cuts and tidying up and gating and stuff. Okay, great. So we might also decide that our snare tracks are strong enough. We've got two of them over after all. And we want to be even more extreme and go up and take out the snare as well. Obviously we've got a bit more snare information up here, but I don't really think we should high pass right up to here because you might sound a bit weird. Okay, you're getting that sort of washy sound. You can't hear it in the mix. Okay, I liked it when it cut the snare out, but I don't want to be so extreme with my high pass filter, so I move that back just to cut the kick drum out, and instead I might just dip a little bit where the snares are hitting and see what that sounds like. Okay, that's good. So remedial EQ here, cuts, just to take that out. And let's look at some of these qualities that they suggest us to look at. Cymbals. So between 100 and 300, clunk. Now, clunk doesn't sound like it could be very good, but let's hear what clunk sounds like boosted up. So let's move up to 300. And boost. We're going to boost that up. We're going to start from 0 so we don't hurt our ears. I wouldn't say that sounds clunky, but we get when we boost it up, it's certainly not doing anything. So let's see what it sounds like. Cut. It's affecting snare rather than anything else because this is an overhead track and it's picking up that as well. If it's just a cymbal on its own, like a sample or something, it may affect it differently. However, in this overhead here, I did actually enjoy the effect of having a cut there had on the sound of the snare in the overhead mic. Okay, we're just getting the rattle up here a bit now. So that was all good. Let's move on to the next bit they suggest, which is ringing overtones. So between 1 and 6 kilohertz. Let's have a little look here. So let's move this one up to 1000. And going to do the same technique, narrow bandwidth. Okay, we're not really getting it on this track, on this overhead mic, but sometimes, typically with cymbals, you can get these like ringing overtone sounds if you get them naturally. The mic has emphasized them. In this track, we haven't, but sometimes if you scan and boost up there, you can find them. In this track, we haven't really got them. So in your recording, you may find them, but in this, we haven't really found them. So doing that didn't really do anything for us. Like with hi-hats, we could explore getting a little bit more sizzle with the high shell filter, as they suggest here, between 8 and 12. Okay, so a bit higher start than the sizzle of the hi-hat. So let's have a little look. Okay, so if I emphasize that load, you can really hear that fizzy sizzle sound. Now again, don't be fooled because you can hear it louder, it sounds better. That is going to really, really pierce through the mix and interfere with the high end of vocals, guitars, that sort of thing, or in electronic tracks, synths, stuff like that, or your lead. So we don't want that bigger boost. Start from 0. Once you hear a little bit of sizzle, that's probably round about enough. And check with it off. How does it change? Okay, and in high frequencies, even that little boost there, you could hear the difference. So that just proves my point how sensitive your ears are to high frequency boosts. So please be careful with making high boosts in your tracks. Bass and high, it doesn't sound good boosting huge amounts up there, as you've just heard. Okay, so usually with EQ boosts, less is more. With cuts, you can be a bit more brutal, but with boosts, please watch your gain. Okay, so just listen to that hi-hat, overhead EQ. Okay, there we go. Again, loads more to explore. You can also start with one of the presets, like this, and they've given a little boost around there where the ringing overtones are, and you can then tweak theirs. Make that a bit more brutal, depending on your needs. What has the mic picked up? What has it seen? And what qualities do you want to emphasize or remove? Okay, your choice. You're the producer. Thanks for watching.